Hi, I'm Dr. Rosemarie Dombrowski, a senior lecturer in English on the downtown campus, and I'm also the Poet Laureate of Phoenix. Today I'm going to talk about poetry as public art, a means to community consciousness. In general, the objectives of public art are to facilitate an inclusive conversation, interact with the community, showcase the democratization of art across demographics, and tell the stories of the community members in which it's embedded. More specifically, poetry as public art is equally effective in facilitating conversations and a more inclusive ethos in both the art community and the community at large. Furthermore, poetry as public art facilitates the notion that poetry is a living, breathing force that can both reflect and augment a city. It also inspires people to see that the poetic platform has the potential to bring people together through the arts. And unlike poetic performance or any performance, it has permanence, allowing people to experience it repeatedly and on their own terms. Though poetry is a relatively new subgenre of public art, some iconic examples in the US include the Corvallis Poetry Marquee, the Addison Street Poetry Walk in Berkeley, the 7th Avenue Streetscapes in Phoenix, Passage, the poetic shade structure at South Mountain Community Library, and Raining Poetry, a sidewalk installation in Boston. Out of the spirit of some of the publicly funded, collaborative poetry as public art installations around the US, the Phoenix Community Poetry Gardens project was born. The gardens, spaces of lyrical, linguistic street art, will grow out of various high schools around Central Phoenix. The materials and mediums are variable, as are the modes of poetic inscription, but what remains constant are the voices and visions of the youth within the community. The project begins with a sequence of workshops in which participants address the role of poetry as public art, discussing everything from its sociocultural value, the potential relationships between linguistic and visual texts, and the potential narratives and themes brought forth by the texts themselves, like inclusion, healing, agency, identity, empowerment, and human rights. Once the poems have been produced and workshopped by the students, visual artists will teach participants some techniques and assist with the inscription of both the text and the visual art on the designated surface. Once completed and installed, the artwork will be launched at a community celebration and will remain on display for an undetermined period of time. True community embeddedness can only be achieved when the antiquated researcher-subject paradigm is disrupted, and arguably when the researcher endeavors to move beyond the two-pronged methodology of qualitative and quantitative research. And that's where arts-based research comes in, purporting a third method that allows for a multi-voiced textual product, a text that's inclusive of the actual language, cadence, and tenor of the participants. It's one that also encourages a more collaborative relationship between researcher and participants. It can be either performative or literary in nature, and when the product is poetic, it results in the production of what's called poetic ethnography. Poetic ethnography allows the voices of the participants to be spoken and retransmitted an unlimited number of times and in multiple contexts through the voice and performances of the poet ethnographer. It also allows for the dissemination of voice and the reinscription of agency through a poet who is committed to not just telling his or her story via a platform of privilege, but one who's committed to building bridges between communities, taking the initial steps toward creating spaces where the agency of all community members is recognized. Of course, the ultimate goal is not for the researchers to continue to produce ethnographic poetry, but for the community members themselves to create auto-ethnographic poetry, that which is produced from within the community by someone who identifies as a member of that community. This is exactly what the Community Poetry Gardens promotes: the creation and voicing of stories by the people who are living them. Community embeddedness should spawn from an initial period of research or field work, but it must also involve members of the existing community in order to become an effective platform for community pride. Our community is at its strongest when all of our members have the space to articulate their stories, to create their own histories. And if we can help carve out and facilitate those spaces for the underrepresented, then we're serving the discipline of applied ethics in the most advantageous way. Thanks.